Well, this is pretty much what we're going to be reporting on now for, well, the foreseeable future. Johnson basically lying and blustering, trying to present something to the public which is just completely not true. And sooner or later, people are going to pick up on this. Papers are already starting to question Johnson's stance. And even though many papers are, quote, for Brexit now, I guarantee you it won't be sooner or later before they start saying that Brexit isn't working. For example, all those people in Parliament Square on that Friday night where they were cheering the recording of Big Ben ringing out, I guarantee you in a year's time they will be calling for Johnson's head. As Terry Pratchett once said, the crowd that cheers your coronation is also the crowd that cheers your execution. No matter what, people just love a show. So, here's this there we go. Here's this for today's Chaussee reading. Boris Johnson's bluster shows the UK is no closer to accepting Brexit reality. Once again, reality always wins. It always wins. And Brexit is just a complete denial of reality for trying to claim that we have unicorn farms springing up all over the country. Yeah. So, it was supposed to be done. We were told it was done. We were promised it was done. An hour before the seemingly endless month of January due to a close, the UK left the European Union thanks to a transition period. Very little changed. While we don't have MEPs or anything or any say in the EU policy making anymore, we can still for now easily trade and travel between EU nations. But there is no longer any means in the short or medium term for reversing our decision to leave. If we want to be EU members once again, the battle would now have to be to rejoin on entirely new terms. Not to avoid leaving, in that sense, surely Brexit is done. Looking at the newspaper headlines and the Prime Minister's waffle, it certainly doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, it seems horribly like, in the words of his predecessor, nothing has changed. We will have yet another new term for a no-deal for a no-deal Brexit, an Australian-style trade deal. A cute shorthand designed to rebrand the trading with the EU without any deal, despite the simple virtue of naming a country which currently does so. Never mind that Australia's economy relies on exporting goods and raw materials, while the UK is dominated by complex goods and supply chains. Some car engines cross the channel 5 times during production, and even more so by services. And while Australia is around 8,700 miles away from the EU's nearest point, the UK is just 20 miles away. So an Australian-style deal isn't just a rhetoric trick to sell no deal at the end of the year. It is an outright falsehood. So far, so familiar. We've also had the familiar gut of blustering nonsense from ministers threatening the EU with what they would refuse to accept the level playing field rules, insisting they are happy to engage in border checks and won't allow Brussels to dictate product standards. As ever, such threats were either contradicted by the UK's position stated in the political declaration, which Boris Johnson himself agreed and passed through Parliament, or else the outright daft Johnston's position on accepting product standards suggests that the UK currently doesn't apply its own standards to products we import. As anyone trying to sell chlorinated chicken into the UK so far knows, that is not the case. Trading with someone means following their rules, for at least what you send to them. Just as with the Brexit debate, this bluster is becoming concluded entirely in the pages of UK newspapers and broadcasts, apparently aimed at a UK audience. The EU is once again set out its positions and its negotiating red lines in public documents, available from its own websites with thousands of words in detail. Just as with the Article 50 talks, negotiators will not be allowed to deviate from the red lines once given to them by the 27 EU leaders. So once again, the only people who need to be taken in by the UK's government and bluster are the UK public via the UK political lobby. Further showing that there is nothing new under the sun, we can already get for a ready and potential future agreement over whether or not the transition should be extended. Sound familiar? Surrounded by the government of businesses arguing about the need for clarity to avoid cliff edges. If we don't start hearing about queues at Dover and factories with no supplies again, just within weeks or months from now. Most of this is because Brexit is done only in names and legalities. Johnson's Brexit got all the flag waving bit done and absolutely nothing else. All the problems, complexities and the potential costs are still in front of us. The details have never been Johnson's strong suit. Rather than use his thumping majority and 4 years of time between him and the ballot box to confront with the realities to try and actually get a working Brexit done, Johnson has decided to double down on the bluster and nonsense that has characterised the last 3.5 years in a manner of a free diver hurtling headlong towards a cliff, confident of a 20 foot from the ground that his technique is working perfectly so far. Sadly for us, we are strapped in and plunging along with him in the most boring and repetitive round of self-destruction into which any modern government has voluntarily agreed. Some of the darkest warnings about Brexit were overblown, unhelpful ones, and it made it sound like the moment of leaving the EU, especially if it were without a deal, would be nothing short of hell itself. Those scenarios were never going to come to pass. It could be demoralising, destructive, and an act of national self-harm, leading to shortages and leaving us poor, but it was never going to actually destroy the nation. Brexit was never going to be hell, but Boris Johnson and his government seem to be doing everything in their power to make sure it is purgatory. And that's, once again, where we are. You are going to see, again, the summertime, end of summer, we need to extend the transition period. I guarantee you the transition period is going to be extended. I would be willing to put money on it being extended. This idea of a no deal or quote Australia deal, it ain't gonna happen. Why? Because I hold out hope that there are at least some sensible Conservative MPs in there who are going to go, no, if I vote for this, I'm going to lose my seat. So I can't, in all good conscience, do and vote for this. We hope. We live in hope. But there you go.